I apologize for the short video. I got back-to-back 3 times calls from my daughter, and she has our granddaughter in daycare, so I had to drop and answer the phone because I didn't know what the situation was. So forgive me for having to do that. But let's get back to what we were talking about. We were talking about the common pattern of domestic violence, the tension building phase. This is where tensions are building. They haven't fully exploded this time, but they're building. This is where issues like money, children, jobs. This is where the verbal abuse begins. The victim tries to control the situation by pleasing the abuser, giving in or avoiding the abuse. None of these will stop the violence. Eventually, tension reaches to a boiling point and physical abuse begins. So, if you're here and you're seeing somebody and you're trying to work with a friend of yours or a family, and you can kind of see the tension phase. This is a serious phase. Hopefully, you can diffuse this by talking to them, by telling them different things, because this is going to escalate. It's not that maybe it is. After the tension phase, there's going to become an acute battering episode. I mean, this is from years of studying, my part from psychology and other psychologists, psychiatrists. They'll tell you this is the beginning stage. Second stage we're going to talk about. Acute battering episode. When the tension peaks, the physical violence begins. It is usually triggered by the presence or external event or by the abuser's emotional state, not by the victim's behavior. So this means that the battering phase is unpredictable and beyond the victim's control. However, some experts believe that in some cases, victims may unconsciously provoke the abuse so they can release the tension and move on to the honeymoon phase. Have I seen this? Yes. Is it a good thing to do? No. They know this person that they live with, or they're married to, or they're dating, or something's going on. So they know the tension phase is there, that they're fixing to get abused. They go ahead and provoke it because they want to get to the honeymoon phase. But what do we mean by the honeymoon phase? Remember, you guys and ladies, when you first got married? That great, where everything was great and wonderful. You could live off love and you didn't need to eat and everything was there until you start getting into reality. Well, this is what they want. First, the abuser is ashamed of his or her behavior. Expression remorse tries to minimize the abuse and might even blame it on the partner. You caused me to do that. Now, if you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. I lost my temper and I didn't mean to hurt you. I mean, it's just, it goes either way. This is what you'll hear from them. Then they may exhibit loving, kind behavior, followed by apologies, generously and helpfulness. They'll go out, they'll buy them something. Guys will go out and they'll buy them roses or they'll buy them a necklace. They'll do something. They feel guilty of what they did. But they've done blamed it on them. They provoked it. So what they want to do, they want to go out and they want to buy them this. They want to win their love back. This is called the honeymoon phase. They promise it won't happen again. How many times have you heard this? If you've ever worked with somebody who's been abused by counseling, well, they told me they wouldn't do it again. How many times does it take? Hopefully, the abused spouse or person in relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, I do that because a lot of teenagers this way. Hopefully, they learn to get out before it's too late. Because the worst part of this sometimes it leads to death. They abuse them so much and it gets worse, and they keep beating on them. Sometimes they finally end up doing what they shouldn't do. So hopefully you can work with these people if you're working with them. Get them professional help. make sure that you try to get them to a better situation. You're not going to do any good by telling them, you know, they're just beating on you. You need to move out. You don't need that high, almighty attitude of doing this. You need a kind, compassionate attitude. You know, this may happen again. Can I get you some help? Can I get somebody to talk to? Can you do things? I mean, you need to know where you stand on this. You need to know the laws of your land. Okay? You need to know that. Because here's what I mean. I'm not going to try to tell you, but I'm going to give you a question. If somebody being abused, do you have to report this as a chaplain? Who are you being chaplain for? Know the laws of your land. I know what the state of Alabama tells me I have to do. If I see something going on, I know what the laws are. You remember, you're a minister, so things can be told you in confidentiality. Do you have to report this if you know this is going on? Things you need to get with and find out, because as a chaplain, you need to know this. You need to know what you can do and what you can't do. Teens being abused. It is hard for teens to face their abuse if they go to the same school. Bullying, what we used to call it back in the old days. It's hard to face your bully person if you go to the same school, if you get it done every day. Now, back in my era, back in the 60s and 70s, when I went to high school and stuff like that, we had a different way of handling this. A lot of times you got bullied. A lot of times you just stood up and you and the bully had it out and y'all become best friends. Nowadays, you never know. Nowadays, you stand up and this person stands up and may get shot and may get stabbed. I mean, it's not society I grew up back then. So you need to know how this society is and how you're going to handle the situation. So you're talking to a teenager and talking about always getting abused, getting bullied. Do you have to report this? Do you have to report it to the counselor? Are they going to do anything about it? Do you have to report it to the principal? Or do you have to report it to the local authorities? What status do you have to do when you're having this? But it's hard to get out of a situation when you're facing it every day. And children know what happened. They can feel helpless, scared, upset. They can be told the violence was their fault. Well, if you hadn't said that to me coming down the hallway, I wouldn't have done that to you. A bully is always going to blame it on somebody else. They ain't got the guts to stand up and take responsibility for being a bully. It's always somebody else's fault. They always got to blame it on somebody else. You've seen this, and that's what's going to continue to happen. So how do you handle this teenager, this child, this adult being bullied? How do you handle that? Violence in the home is dangerous for children. Children live with scary noises, yelling, hitting. They're afraid for their parents and themselves. Children feel bad they cannot stop the abuse. If they try to stop the fight, they can be hurt. They can also be hurt by things that are thrown or weapons that are used. Children are harmed just by seeing and hearing the violence. Like I said, what do you do as a chaplain? You know, children hear their parents fight all the time. They see one of them getting hit. One of them runs up. Daddy's hitting on mommy, and they try to run up to mommy. Daddy shoves them over a couch or something. They get a broke bone. I mean, what are they going to think from then on? They hear all these noises. It's not a great place to be. They can get hurt. Okay. So when you haven't faced domestic violence in the home, can you handle this? Can you control your temper? That's a good question. I always told my wife when I was doing the fire service as a paramedic that if I ever lost my job, it was because I caught somebody abusing a child. And I did something that I shouldn't do. Morally, if I'd went ahead and just beat them down and say, how does it feel and everything like that, made me feel good, but I would have lost my job. Can you handle this situation? Do you need mentally to handle the situation? Something you have to think about as a chaplain. Can I handle this? And remember, you are there to cause no harm. You are there to try to help. You're a God-called minister, chaplain, to help people. That's what we try to do. Who do you call? What do you need to do? What's the rules? What's going on? See, domestic violence is something that happens all the time. Most of your police officers up to the last year, and you could call it domestic violence, but most of your police officers got hurt because they showed up to a domestic violence argument between a husband and wife. First of all, they go in and they try to calm the situation. So let's just say they say, okay, the husband's at fault, and they're going to put handcuffs on him and they're taking him to the police station. So they turn around, they start putting handcuffs on him, and boom, they just got hit with a daggum cast iron frying pan. You see, now that other spouse is thinking, no, you're not taking my spouse. You're trying to take them away from me and all that. So they've jumped on you. Most police officers don't like to go into domestic violence situations, and they're trained to handle it. How about you? Are you trained as chaplain to handle it? Do you know how you're going to handle it? What if somebody tells you to be installed? What if they tell you they have a restraining order and you drive up and a block from their house, you see the person that's been stalking them sitting at the end of the block, watching down that road, watching their house? What's your obligations? One, you don't stop and confront them. That's not your job. But what's your obligations to somebody being stalked? Do you know your laws again? If you see this person, does your law state that you need to pull down the road and you need to call the police and tell them where they're located at and what they're doing? Is this going to escalate the situation if you do that? If they find out you're the one that did it, what's going to happen? A lot of questions. We will go over that when we do moral and ethics. What's your morals? What's your ethics on this? How would you handle this situation? How would you do things? Stalking's a crime. So you need to know, like I said, remember what I told you about that list, how to help people? You might want to have the police department in that list. You might want to have homeless shelters in that list. You might want to have a safe house for ladies or guys to go to that's been abused or children's been abused. You know, you need to do that. You need to be prepared. My lieutenant we used to go over pump operations, and for y'all are not in fire service, that's how much water that it takes to get 150 PSI out of a hose to put a fire out. And he'd go, well, I won't give you all that scenario because Gary's got it memorized. You're right. As an engineer, I knew how much water. My assistant chief, you're supposed to have 170 pound PSI to get 150 gallons per minute out of an 1 3/4 hose, but he liked his at 150. You better not hit him with 170 PSI because he could handle 150. I knew that. I knew what he liked. I knew what the others liked. I knew what I was supposed to do because at 3 o'clock in the morning and your house is burning and you want us to save somebody inside or you want to burn down, you want me to know. You don't want me looking in and guessing. So same way, carry your papers with you. Carry it in your phone, whatever you need to do. Keep the numbers in there that you need to use as a chaplain. It's a good thing to have. That way, you know how quickly you can get to things. So let's close out this lesson about domestic violence and education for chaplains. So, y'all go take a break. Get something to drink. Get you something to eat. Come back. We will have another lesson. God bless.